Buried deep in the deserts of New Mexico, a secret was born that would change the world forever: the Manhattan Project. Imagine a mission so vast and so hidden that more than 130,000 people worked tirelessly on it, yet most had no idea what they were truly creating. Behind guarded fences and in isolated towns, the brightest minds in physics and engineering were brought together under one purpose: to build a weapon unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Directed by General Leslie Groves and led by the brilliant yet conflicted J. Robert Oppenheimer, this project fused science, secrecy, and desperation in a race against Nazi Germany. What began as a wartime experiment quickly grew into a force that redefined power itself. At Los Alamos, scientists wrestled with theories of nuclear fission, turning equations on chalkboards into devastating reality. In Oak Ridge and Hanford, massive facilities worked day and night to produce the uranium and plutonium needed for the bombs. Every part of the project was cloaked in silence. Families, workers, and even some scientists knew only fragments, never the full truth. And then came the moment that shattered history: the Trinity test of July 16, 1945. A flash brighter than the sun erupted over the desert floor, a mushroom cloud soaring into the sky, marking the dawn of the atomic age. From that blast emerged not only a weapon, but a question: had mankind just secured its future, or signed its destruction? This is the story of the Manhattan Project, America's nuclear birthplace. A tale of brilliance and fear, ambition and secrecy, where the line between victory and catastrophe was drawn in fire. At the heart of the Manhattan Project stood Los Alamos, New Mexico, transformed almost overnight into a secret city. Barbed wire surrounded the area, guards patrolled its gates, and workers lived under constant surveillance. This was no ordinary town, it was a community built for secrecy, where every conversation was monitored and letters home were censored. Scientists like Enrico Fermi, Niels Bohr, and Richard Feynman walked the same dusty paths, their minds racing with ideas that could either save the world or doom it. Families came to, often unaware of the magnitude of their husbands' and fathers' work. Children played in the desert sands while inside hidden laboratories. Theories of splitting the atom were being tested with terrifying precision. Day and night, chalkboards filled with equations, machines roared with experimentation, and breakthroughs emerged that pushed the limits of physics. Yet alongside the excitement was unease. The moral weight of building a weapon of unprecedented power haunted many. Oppenheimer himself, brilliant and conflicted, quoted ancient texts as he realized the destructive path unfolding. Still, under the pressure of war and the fear that Germany might succeed first, hesitation was buried, and progress marched on. Every experiment brought them closer to unlocking a secret force that had rested in the heart of matter since the dawn of time. Every success also deepened the realization that they were forging something mankind might never control. What began as an intellectual challenge had become a race against time, driven by secrecy, fear, and ambition. Los Alamos was not just a laboratory. It was the birthplace of an era, a crucible where science and secrecy collided to create the most devastating weapon the world had ever seen. Far from the laboratories of Los Alamos, other hidden sites across America pulsed with the energy of the Manhattan Project. In Oak Ridge, Tennessee, entire factories were constructed in record time to separate uranium isotopes, using vast machines that rattled and roared day and night. Thousands of workers, many of them young women, twisted knobs and monitored dials without ever knowing the true purpose of their labor. To them it was just another wartime job. To the leaders of the project, it was the lifeblood of the bomb. Meanwhile, in Hanford, Washington, immense reactors churned out plutonium, a substance so new and mysterious that even the scientists handling it could barely believe its existence. Security was suffocating, guards at every gate, strict compartmentalization of information, and harsh punishments for any breach of secrecy. It was a world where silence wasn't just expected, it was enforced. Yet, despite the isolation and secrecy, a strange sense of unity formed among those who lived in these temporary cities. Grocery stores, schools, and theaters were set up, making these secret towns feel alive, even as their true mission remained cloaked in shadows. Workers whispered rumors about the gadget being built, but no one dared ask too many questions. The scale of the project was unlike anything ever attempted in history. Billions of dollars poured into hidden facilities. Millions of man-hours devoted to a weapon that only a handful of men truly understood. In every corner of Oak Ridge and Hanford, science and industry worked hand in hand to fuel the fire of a new age. These sites were the veins pumping material to Los Alamos, where the heart of the bomb was being crafted. Together, They formed an invisible empire of secrecy, ambition, and destiny. As the project advanced, the pressure to deliver results grew heavier. By 1944, with uranium enrichment underway and plutonium production in full swing, the scientists of Los Alamos were racing against both time and uncertainty. The design of the bomb itself posed immense challenges. The uranium bomb, later named Little Boy, relied on a relatively straightforward design, but the plutonium bomb, Fat Man, demanded a complex implosion method, using carefully synchronized explosives to compress plutonium into a critical mass. Achieving this precision pushed engineering and physics into uncharted territory. Experiments multiplied, calculations were checked and rechecked, and entire teams were dedicated to solving problems no one had ever faced before. The desert laboratories buzzed with tension, as brilliant minds argued fiercely over theories while working side by side under crushing secrecy. Failures were frequent, but each setback only sharpened their determination. Oppenheimer, thin and restless, walked the labs at night, a chain-smoker haunted by the knowledge of what they were building. Some scientists admitted privately to feeling fear more than pride, but the looming specter of Nazi Germany's progress in nuclear research silenced doubt. Every passing day carried whispers of German advancements and fears that they might unleash their own weapon first. That fear drove the scientists harder, binding them to the belief that they had no choice but to succeed. Beyond the fences of Los Alamos, the world remained unaware, yet inside those walls, the countdown to a new era had already begun. Blueprints of unimaginable destruction were turning into real objects, and the final pieces of the puzzle were nearly complete. The question was no longer if the bomb could be built, but when it would be ready to unleash its power upon the world. On July 16, 1945, in the barren desert of Alamogordo, New Mexico, the Manhattan Project reached its defining moment, the Trinity test. In the pre-dawn hours, a hush fell over the desert as scientists, soldiers, and generals gathered at observation posts miles away from Ground Zero. The device, nicknamed the Gadget, had been hoisted atop a steel tower, wires snaking into bunkers where anxious technicians waited with trembling hands. At exactly 5:29 a.m., the countdown began. Hearts pounded as fear, excitement, and dread swirled together. When the bomb detonated, the desert exploded with light brighter than the sun itself. A scorching fireball rose into the air, expanding into a massive mushroom cloud that climbed more than 40,000 feet. The shockwave tore through the desert floor, shattering windows over 100 miles away. Observers were stunned into silence, many shielding their eyes, others whispering prayers. Oppenheimer, recalling Hindu scripture, murmured the haunting words, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds." The success was undeniable. The unimaginable had been achieved, yet with it came a deep unease. Some scientists cheered, convinced they had delivered the key to ending the war. Others stood pale and shaken, realizing they had unleashed a force that could annihilate entire cities in an instant. The desert, once still and empty, had become the birthplace of the atomic age. News of the test remained locked in secrecy, known only to those within the project and the highest levels of government. But in that fiery moment, history had shifted forever. The power of the atom had been split, harnessed, and transformed into mankind's deadliest weapon. From Trinity onward, the world would never again be the same. That the success of the Trinity test sent shockwaves through the secret world of the Manhattan Project, though it remained unknown to the wider public. Within hours, cables were sent to Washington confirming that the gadget had worked beyond expectation. For President Harry Truman, who was meeting Allied leaders at the Potsdam Conference, this news changed the course of war strategy. The bomb was no longer a theory, it was a weapon ready for use. In the days following Trinity, the military rushed to finalize the deployment of the two bombs destined for Japan. The uranium device, Little Boy, required no further testing and was prepared for loading onto a specially modified B-29 bomber named Enola Gay. The more complex plutonium device, Fat Man, was assembled with painstaking care. Its components shipped under heavy guard to the Pacific island of Tinian. The secrecy was so intense that only a handful of men knew the full details of the mission. Scientists who had labored for years felt conflicting emotions, pride in their achievement, fear of its consequences, and anxiety over how it would be used. Many believed the bomb would force Japan's surrender, sparing countless American and Japanese lives in a bloody ground invasion. Yet others worried that unleashing it on civilian populations would forever stain the project with moral guilt. Meanwhile, ordinary workers at Oak Ridge, Hanford, and Los Alamos celebrated in ignorance, still unaware that their efforts were about to bring fire upon distant cities. As Little Boy and Fat Man were readied for their fateful journeys, the world unknowingly stood at the edge of a new chapter. The stage was set for the bombs to reveal their power not in the desert of New Mexico, but in the heart of Japan. On the morning of August 6, 1945, the world witnessed the terrifying debut of the atomic bomb. At 8:15 a.m., the Enola Gay released Little Boy over the Japanese city of Hiroshima. In a blinding flash, the bomb detonated about 1,900 feet above the ground, unleashing an explosion equal to nearly 15,000 tons of TNT. The heart of Hiroshima was instantly flattened, buildings reduced to ash, and tens of thousands of people vanished in seconds. The heat was so intense that human shadows were seared onto stone walls, leaving ghostly imprints of lives erased in an instant. A firestorm swept across the city, devouring everything in its path. By nightfall, over 70,000 people were dead, and thousands more lay injured, their bodies burned, their voices crying out for water amid the ruins. Radiation, an invisible killer, began poisoning survivors, causing sickness, hair loss, and death in the days and weeks that followed. For those who lived, the bombing left scars far beyond the physical families torn apart, children orphaned, and an entire city struggling to comprehend what had happened. News of the destruction stunned the world. Many Americans saw it as a decisive step toward victory, while others recoiled at the scale of civilian suffering. In Tokyo, Japanese leaders remained divided. Some pushed for surrender, while military hardliners argued to fight on. As Hiroshima smoldered, the United States prepared to drop the second bomb, hoping to end the war once and for all. The devastation of Hiroshima was only the beginning. The age of nuclear warfare had begun, and the horrors of that single morning would echo across history as a warning of what mankind's science had unleashed. 3 days after Hiroshima, on August 9, 1945, the second atomic bomb fell upon Nagasaki. Originally, the target had been Kokura, but heavy clouds forced the B-29 boxcar to divert to its secondary objective. At 11:02 a.m., the plutonium bomb Fat Man detonated above the city, unleashing a blast even stronger than Hiroshima's. The explosion carved a valley of fire, flattening neighborhoods and turning the industrial heart of Nagasaki into rubble. Around 40,000 people were killed instantly, with tens of thousands more succumbing to burns, injuries, and radiation in the following weeks. Though Nagasaki's hilly terrain absorbed some of the shock, the destruction was still overwhelming. Homes, factories, and schools vanished in an instant. Survivors, known as hibakusha, carried scars on their bodies and souls for the rest of their lives. The double strike left Japan reeling. Emperor Hirohito, deeply shaken, urged surrender, declaring that to continue the war meant nothing less than the annihilation of his people. On August 15th, he addressed the nation in a historic radio broadcast, announcing Japan's unconditional surrender to the Allies. World War II, the deadliest conflict in human history, was over. Yet victory came at a staggering price. More than 200,000 lives lost in Hiroshima and Nagasaki combined, and countless others suffering from radiation's lingering grip. For many, the bombings were justified as the only way to end the war quickly, sparing millions of lives that an invasion might have cost. For others, they stood as the gravest example of human cruelty and the dangers of unchecked scientific power. With Japan's surrender, the world stepped out of the flames of war and into the shadow of the mushroom cloud, a reminder that humanity now held the power to destroy itself. The surrender of Japan marked the end of World War II, but it also marked the beginning of an entirely new era, the nuclear age. The success of the Manhattan Project had given the United States an unprecedented weapon, but it also set off a global chain reaction of fear and competition. Within months, the Soviet Union, once an ally, began accelerating its own atomic program, determined not to fall behind. The secrecy that had defined the Manhattan Project gave way to a new kind of transparency, one enforced by espionage, as Soviet spies infiltrated American labs and carried crucial secrets across borders. Soon, nations across the world understood that nuclear weapons were not just tools of war, but symbols of power, deterrence, and dominance. For ordinary people, the news of Hiroshima and Nagasaki sparked awe, dread, and moral questioning. Could humanity survive if such weapons spread unchecked? Scientists who had once cheered their success began to voice deep regret. Some, like Oppenheimer, called for international control of nuclear arms, warning that the world stood on the edge of self-destruction. Yet politicians and generals saw in the bomb a way to maintain superiority. This clash of conscience and strategy laid the foundation for the Cold War, where superpowers stockpiled thousands of nuclear warheads, each more powerful than the last. The haunting images of charred cities and shadowed walls became permanent reminders of what these weapons could do. The Manhattan Project had not just ended a war, it had opened a Pandora's box that could never be closed. From that moment onward, every nation understood the future of war, peace, and survival would forever be shaped by the power of the atom. While the Manhattan Project was born in secrecy and war, its legacy stretched far beyond the battlefield. The discoveries made in splitting the atom opened doors to scientific revolutions in energy, medicine, and research. Nuclear fission, once just a theoretical idea on blackboards, became the foundation of nuclear power plants capable of generating vast amounts of electricity. Across the United States and eventually the world, reactors were constructed not for bombs, but to fuel homes, factories, and cities. Medical science also seized the breakthroughs. Radioactive isotopes, once dangerous byproducts of the project, became tools to fight disease, diagnose illnesses, and advance cancer treatment. Universities established new programs in nuclear physics, training a generation of scientists inspired by the work at Los Alamos. Even space exploration benefited, with nuclear power later driving spacecraft beyond the reach of solar energy. Yet this dual legacy was always shadowed by the weapon that had made it possible. Many of the same laboratories that pioneered peaceful applications also remained tied to the production of arms, blurring the line between science for progress and science for destruction. The Manhattan Project had proven that knowledge itself could never be confined to one purpose. Every discovery carried two faces, one of hope, one of fear. For the scientists who once walked the desert sands of New Mexico, this was both a source of pride and a burden. They had unlocked the secrets of the atom, but they had also unleashed forces humanity might never fully control. The civilian world benefited immensely from their breakthroughs, yet the specter of the mushroom cloud always lingered in the background. The question remained, could mankind harness atomic energy for light and life, or would it forever remain chained to darkness and death? Secrecy was the lifeblood of the Manhattan Project, and it shaped the daily lives of everyone involved. At Los Alamos, Oak Ridge, and Hanford, workers lived in fenced-in towns where mail was censored, phones were tapped, and even casual conversations could be monitored. Men and women punched in long shifts without knowing the true nature of their tasks. Many thought they were helping build a new kind of weapon, but few could grasp its scale. Some tightened bolts, others turned dials on machines, while scientists wrestled with equations behind locked doors. Families lived in prefabricated houses, shopped at company stores, and raised children in what seemed like ordinary towns. Yet shadows of secrecy loomed over every street. For the scientists, the burden was heavier. They understood what was being built, and with every experiment, they felt the moral weight grow. Robert Oppenheimer often spoke in riddles and poetry, revealing his unease, while others like Leo Szilard pleaded for caution, drafting petitions to limit the bomb's use. Arguments flared in laboratories late into the night. Should science serve victory at all costs, or did some discoveries demand restraint? Yet the urgency of war silenced dissent, and many pushed forward, convincing themselves that defeating the Nazis justified the means. When Germany surrendered before the bomb was ready, unease deepened. Now the target was Japan, and some wondered if the project's purpose had shifted from necessity to demonstration of power. The workers and scientists alike carried questions they could not ask, living in a world where secrecy bound them tighter than chains. Only when Hiroshima and Nagasaki burned did the true scope of their work become clear, leaving many haunted by the realization that their hands had helped forge humanity's deadliest weapon. Today, the legacy of the Manhattan Project lives on, not just in history books, but in the landscapes where it unfolded. Los Alamos, Oak Ridge, and Hanford have been preserved as part of the Manhattan Project National Historical Park, allowing visitors to step into the hidden cities where science, secrecy, and war collided. Twice a year, the Trinity test site at Alamogordo opens to the public, drawing crowds who stand on the scorched earth where the first atomic fire lit the sky. These places serve as reminders of both human brilliance and human peril. The project demonstrated the heights of innovation, the ability to mobilize vast resources, unite brilliant minds, and solve impossible problems under immense pressure. Yet it also revealed the dangers of unchecked power, secrecy, and the ethical dilemmas of scientific discovery. Oppenheimer's haunting reflection, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds," still echoes as a warning that knowledge without wisdom can bring devastation. The nuclear age it unleashed continues to shape global politics, with thousands of warheads still poised across the world decades after the bombs fell on Japan. At the same time, peaceful applications of nuclear science power cities, cure diseases, and even fuel space exploration. This dual legacy, hope and horror intertwined, remains the Manhattan Project's most profound lesson. It asks us to reflect on what humanity should do with the knowledge it gains, and how far it should go in the pursuit of power. As visitors walk the halls of Los Alamos or stand at the Trinity site, they are confronted with the truth that history is not distant, it lives in the choices we inherit. The Manhattan Project was more than a wartime effort. It was the birth of a new world, one we still live in today.